the president recognizes that he wasn't able to achieve a lot of the things that he had originally campaigned on, primarily because of the bad people that were recommended to him in term one. And there were not very many people in DC who actually agreed with, they were professional conservatives, as it were, but like they didn't actually agree with what the president had campaigned on. So these are competent people who know how to do their jobs well, but some of these things come to their desk and they're just like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. And so I think it's a total change in pace this time because we have, a whole slew of personnel picks that are all on the same page.
Welcome to The Right Stuff. We'll have a very low-key intro to keep Jared pleased. Jared Longshore, thank you for joining me.
Very happy to be here.
Jared, today we are talking about how the conservative movement of today is not what your grandma knew. It's not her conservative
It's really
party.
not. And I'm very fascinated in this topic, and I'm really glad to have Nick here. So,
Nick Solheim
Nick
of American
Solheim.
Moment.
What's up, guys?
Welcome to The Right Stuff.
Yeah.
Nick, we just want to have a discussion with you about like how can Jared get you back to your your small government beginnings.
Yeah, small.
I did used to once upon a time.
Yeah.
I knocked doors for Americans for Prosperity back in the day. I got paid like $12 an hour.
Okay.
Go knock doors for AFP.
Okay.
I've left those days long behind.
Okay.
Behind.
Let's start just by talking about who you are, what you do, a little bit
Yep.
about our relationship. I don't remember how we met or through whom we met, but
I don't either.
somebody out here. You've come out here to Moscow various times. I popped out to DC and got to do podcasts with you at American Moment. It was very fun. And man, you have like an amazing setup. Like you're 2 blocks behind the Supreme Court building.
Yeah,
Is that right?
in the Capitol.
Yeah, and the Capitol. I mean, it's just like fantastic. Walking down DC and going to American Moment headquarters there was like, dude, this is fantastic.
We've actually moved right around the corner from where you visited, and we have a whole townhouse now. It's like
Oh,
the
really?
American Moment Embassy
Nice.
on Capitol Hill.
Okay,
An
nice.
embassy.
Great.
Yeah.
And so tell us, just a little bit about you.
Yeah.
What do you do and how did you kind of come to do it?
Yeah, so I am the CEO of American Moment, and basically the vision for American Moment is that we are identifying, educating, and credentialing the next generation of conservative staff that are going to move our priorities forward. Specifically focused on the issues that the president originally ran on in 2015. So trade, immigration, and foreign policy. Those are sort of, there are a lot of other ancillary issues that, intersect with those, but those are sort of the core 3. And what we're doing is building the bench of political personnel that can fill a lot of these roles in government, whether that be, working as a staff assistant for a member of Congress, whether in the House or the Senate, or a lot of the graduates of our academic programming have gone on to serve in this administration. And then we've sent a lot of people to nonprofits in DC as well, and some private businesses. So really, we're in the business of creating a new class of staffer in Washington, D.C.
And
Real quick, just on that, if not you, then who? So is this something that's already happening? It has been happening in DC for a long time, and you're just like the MAGA yoked version? Or is this, are you sort of pioneering a new thing?
Yeah, so there are some sort of both libertarian and neoconservative versions of what we do, basically providing an additional credential and attempting to rapidly accelerate someone's career. I would say, a couple of things that are different about us versus some of those other institutions that do that sort of thing is, first of all, the ideology is different. We are basically the organization that does this for the America First, movement. And then the other thing that I would say is we have a real focus on what we call the under-credentialed. So I always like to say, DC is a city full of the most mediocre and unimpressive people on the planet. It pre-selects for, going to the most prestigious university, or maybe your dad's a donor or whatever. You have some way of getting your foot in the door, and you get there, and you don't have to work very hard because there isn't really an incentive structure for you to do so. And so really what we prioritize is people who have no way to get their foot in the door in DC, people who are very knowledgeable about what's going on, and many times have been personally impacted by the disastrous policies of subsequent presidential administrations, and the lack of a willingness to actually legislate in Congress. And so we're really focused on those people who otherwise would have no opportunity to get in DC, but in many ways are more qualified than many of the people who are currently there to do it. All they need is some training on actually how to tactically get some of these things done, and then they need some sort of replacement credential that can replace I went to Harvard, Yale, etc. And I would say that we are I would say we're probably on the right of center, the only organization that prioritizes that.
Okay. How many bodies are you working with? How many people are you training up and equipping to be sent into government?
Thousands. So basically, we've got 4 different academic programs that we have running at any given time, all varying in sort of their intensity and how much time you actually spend in the room with us. So on the top level, we have this program called AM Fridays. It's an intern training program that we do in the United States Senate over lunch every Friday. We cater. I spend anywhere between $2,000 to $7,000 on Chick-fil-A a week to cater this program.
Nice.
And last year, in terms of unique interns who attended, I had over 1,000. And we do that program 3 times a year, generally the same lecturers. And then sort of on the other side of the spectrum, we have Frontiers of American Statecraft, which is our most elite program. And that's sort of meant for people who are already pretty advanced in their career. So we're talking House and Senate chiefs of staff, legislative directors, national security advisors, etc. And usually our class size is like 8. So it's like pretty small, but it's meant to credential them in a particular policy area. So the one that we have coming up starting in the next month is on foreign policy. It's a 6-month long course where you get to meet with a lot of the experts actually making policy. And the end goal of this program is to actually credential these people into a new issue area. So, if you're a chief of staff in the House, you have sort of like, broad interests across the sort of policy spectrum, but you haven't really had the opportunity to really specialize in one particular issue and then say, get a job at DOD working on like defense stuff. And this program serves as an avenue to do that, to give you that foreign policy credential so that then you can go and say, hey, I have experience in, foreign policy and defense. I can focus on, these issue areas. I've attended lectures on X, Y, and Z. So, I mean, those are kind of the 2 extreme ends. And then we have 2 programs in between, and we're turning out over 1,000 people a year through all of these.
Okay. Now you have this unique deal. You're still a fairly young man, and yet you're doing big things in DC. How long? I want to ask you some questions about how things have changed, but in order to do that, let's see a little quick. Like, how long have you been on the ground in DC?
Yeah, so I've been in DC since 2018. I moved spring of 2018, but we founded American Moment in 2021. So we've basically been working on this project for the last 4 years.
Okay. But 4 to 7, I mean, you've been involved. You obviously were aware, but you've been actually there kind of seeing the vibe. Because when I came out, it was very interesting to me. I'm 40, you know,
Getting old, Jared.
I know it's weird. I told people recently, you're not old enough to be wise. You're not young enough to be strong. It's just a really weird spot to be in at the 40-year-old. But I remember like Reagan. I mean, it'd be a Reagan thing, and I'm watching the vibe shift. Obviously, we had it with Trump's first presidency. And then the second round is just a fascinating time. Like it's crazy. It's very, very interesting to me. And if I back up reading Up from Conservatism, I think Claremont put that out or something. And looking at the various policies, and again, I'm kind of an amateur, but I'm just reading them thinking that's probably different than what my grandfather would have thought on certain fronts. There really is
depends on how old when your grandfather was born.
There you go. There you go. Yeah. And I want to get into that dynamic.
Yeah.
When I went to D.C. I did a Just War thing. I mean, the thing that struck me was, one, how young these various staffers are.
Yeah.
And
it's a bunch of like 20-somethings literally running the country.
Yeah. Yeah, it was wild. I mean, it was like very interesting. They would come up and I'd be like, are you nice? And then you find out, this guy's like running Josh Hawley's office or whatever. They were all doing, significant things. Yeah. And so you have a front row seat to all that. Yeah. So if you wind the clock back 6 years, is there a significant vibe shift from DC 5-6 years ago to DC now? And if so, what is it?
Well, I mean, COVID is a bit of an outlier there, right? So you rewind 6 years ago and it's like 2019. And then COVID kind of throws everything off. DC is horrible. And there's a lot of division over that stuff. But in terms of like the political mood, I mean, I would attribute the change in pace, I think is the way that I would say it, between, this period of time that we're in now versus this period of time in 2017 in term one. I would attribute the change in pace to personnel. I think, that the president recognizes that he wasn't able to achieve a lot of the things that he had originally campaigned on, primarily because of the bad people that were recommended to him in term one. And there were not very many people in DC who actually agreed with, they were professional conservatives, as it were, but like they didn't actually agree with what the president had campaigned on. So these are competent people who know how to do their jobs well, but some of these things come to their desk and they're just like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. And so I think it's a total change in pace this time because we have, a whole slew of personnel picks that are all on the same page.
Okay, and what are those? I mean, is that a border? Would border be one example of things that they weren't on board, but now we are on board?
Yeah. So I think the three big issues, that the president was heterodox, to the like, say to George W. Bush as an example. The things that he was heterodox on were trade. So the trade should be fair, not necessarily free, right? We need to get good deals for America. We need to protect American industry. We need to have an industry. These were things that the president talked about. And actually, you can find, there are these great clips on YouTube of him calling in to like New York media in the 80s and saying literally the exact same things he's been saying on the campaign trail for the last 10 years. So this has been a deeply held belief of his. So trade is one. The second is that immigration, both legal and illegal, need to be reduced. And so this has been sort of an ongoing debate in the conservative movement as to whether our legal and illegal immigration regimes really serve the national interest, if they actually help our economy. It seems weird to have to ask this question, but there's this sort of conversation happening of like, well, are people really interchangeable widgets, that can just be replaced at any given time? And the president's view is no, they're not. Like, we have a duty to prioritize American workers and the American people and American culture. So immigration is another. And then a deep skepticism of the extent to which we've been involved in foreign conflicts. That's the foreign policy side. So the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were a mistake. We should be deeply skeptical of sending limitless aid to Ukraine, but also to like any other country. And so these are sort of the heterodox. And I would actually say that they're if you look at the historic kind of track of the conservative movement, there's a lot of ideological interlocutors who generally agree with the president's vision, but they were sort of heterodox to the last like 3 decades or so. You look at W, at HW, and then I actually think Reagan and Trump have more in common than most people think, but there are some differences. So,
all right, so let's talk simulators and differences there.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of similarities, they both want America to be strong and to be able to be. I think there's a difference between being influential on the world stage and being involved everywhere. So I've had this conversation actually with Pastor Wilson before, that like the only, we were in this huge Cold War, and the only extent to which we got involved in a major way was like Grenada. And that was basically it. So sort of a skepticism of getting involved, in all of these foreign conflicts. The free traders in particular really like to lionize Reagan for being like the ultimate free trader. He was not. Like, he famously at the time, put tariffs on Japan as an example, for actually to protect Harley Davidson. So they were making a bunch of cheap Japanese motorcycles, and Harley Davidson was about to go under. And so they slapped there was 100% tariffs on Japanese motorcycles, and single-handedly saved Harley Davidson. So I think they do have a lot in common in these senses, and there's sort of, I think a lot of libertarians have this sort of caricature of who Ronald Reagan was that actually isn't true.
Okay. Let's say conservative America, boomers down to,
I love the boomers,
down to millennials that are just out and
Aren't
about.
you skipping a generation?
I'm saying boomers through millennials.
Dude, I'm a Zoomer. I'm Gen Z.
Right. And I'm teeing this up to say, let's take millennials up.
Okay.
In the nation, not Gen Zs.
Okay.
Because the sense I get is I'm thinking of that. I don't know what the magazine was that did like the New Right, and then Vance was like, they're like making us look cool. You know what I mean? Like the young
New Yorker.
Yeah, the New Yorker. I mean, all those vibes. Which, I mean, I'll give you my personal. My personal is like pedal to the metal. I'm like rock and roll. Like, I really am. I just think everything that's happening is really fun and good, and speaks. So I guess coming from the South, coming from Florida, thinking of the way conservatives think, every guy I know that I went to high school with would be totally on board with that kind of the vibe and the vibe shift. So I'm wondering, maybe at one layer under that, what do the millennials and up need to know about real life in DC, on the ground? Like, what don't they understand about the current vibe in DC moment?
Well, I think I said this earlier, but like a lot of people don't really realize the extent to which DC and policymaking is basically controlled by people under the age of 30. So the senator gets a briefing on X, Y, and Z bill. Who's writing the briefing? Like, it's like someone actually probably younger than me. So that is like a real thing that is happening. On the sort of positive side of things that I would say, everybody, I truly do believe, like right and left, everybody in general that comes to DC really does want to do something to make the country better. I happen to think probably about 3/4 of those people are wrong
Okay.
about what they think
Okay.
is best for the country. And a lot of people end up, over the years getting that kind of sucked out of them. Like you get beat down so much, it's like you end up with sort of a myopic view of the world and of the country and of policymaking, etc. The thing that I think is really encouraging, talking about the vibe shift in the moment that we're in right now, is in this sort of, you call it new right. I hate that term. I despise it, but it's fine that you used it. I'm not mad.
What term do you like?
I believe that my worldview is the conservative position, and everybody else should be forced to adopt a hyphenated title.
So you're just conservative.
Yep.
Not new conservative.
Nope.
Not young conservative.
Nope.
Not vibe shift conservative.
Nope.
But you well, hold on. This is important because you totally believe there is a vibe shift.
Yeah.
Okay, like we're dealing with there's been a new birth. We're dealing with something fresh.
He's a cruel kid.
Cruel kid.
He's a cruel kid.
Update me on this.
I
don't
would
know these
say,
terms.
actually, like in terms of the worldview of the conservative movement, this is more. It's not a new thing. It's a return to the mean.
I'm down with it. To return to the mean.
Yeah, like the average.
Okay. Okay. So I love that. I'm all for owning the center. So I think you're basically that would be my terminology. You're wanting to own the center.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Yeah.
But
But the point that I was getting to, right before that was, look, I've been in DC for 7 years, and I've seen the way that it sort of crushes people. We have been in the business of identifying, educating, and credentialing people in this sort of ideological vertical in which we operate. They are not getting crushed. Even when they lose on an issue, I want to get right back out there.
I see that.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. I'm going to use a Zoomer phrase for you. We're so back.
Zoomers do it.
We're so back.
I think the Zoomers are cool, man.
Yeah.
Like I'm always dropping this.
We can dub you an honorary Zoomer. It's fine.
Yeah, I mean, whatever. I'm like the oldest of the millennials. You know what I mean? But the millennials were made fun of a lot.
Nick, he's 40.
But
You're not even a Zoomer, dude.
No, I'm a millennial. I'm ashamed to say it.
I think Jake taught me about that slaps, and I've learned that.
You should disavow that.
I use that one with the kids. It's hard to keep up. But no, that's what I'm actually interested in. Whatever we call it, I'm fine with but you just got to call it something.
Yeah.
You just said 75% of the people you meet you think aren't on the right track. 25% are. This is be another question. I think most conservatives, millennials and up throughout the nation, think that there's a bunch of wahoos out in D.C. that don't know their right hand from their left. And
in what sense?
Well, they're just incompetent people that are going around wasting everybody's time, which is what you're saying of 75%. But what's so weird in the vibe shift is all of a sudden now it feels like it's like all of a sudden like all the competent people showed up, all the go-getters, the Elon Musks of the world, and the whole deal, and all the brilliant people that are there, which that's a significant change. Is that true? Like, have we actually expunged a significant amount of, not just in the new party, but like even within the conservative movement? Has there been a significant cleansing out of people that weren't competent, that didn't have this kind of fortitude and all where'd they come from? How'd this happen?
Yeah, we have either converted or excised a lot of deracinated parts of the movement. Would be my view. Not all. Like, the Cato Institute still exists. It should probably not. But yeah, like I mean, that's been the project that we have been working on for the last couple of years, and there's been a whole host of other organizations as well that we've partnered with, some new, some not, who are very interested in the same thing. And so there have been a lot of people who have sort of over time, as the Overton window has been like blown open in a big way, have realized like, oh my gosh, the president, all these people around him are totally right. I want to be a part of that. The extent, to which we operate in bringing in new people is we are looking for people who are at sort of a first principles level ideologically aligned, and have pure raw talent, have an ability to actually keep track of the details and, get in, and they know how to win. And so it's been a little bit of both. It's been some people, in DC being, sort of converted to the president's worldview. And then it's been, a whole influx of new people. I mean, I have people that have come through our fellowship programs that have quit, $250,000 a year jobs at New York. Like, they were finance bros, and have quit to come and do this because they feel the vibe shift.
Okay, so just I want to sink this point in. I want to live here for a little bit, and I want to sink it in because somebody's going to say, look, DC has always been a place where highly driven young people go. Okay, so maybe what's going on here isn't that big of a deal. It's just the newest wave of young driven types. I don't think that's true. I think there is something in the water. I think there's like a spirit. There's something that has caught fire here. Is that true? Distinguish it from just all of the normal generations of young people in DC that go. Is there something that's caught fire here? And is your assessment that it's going to stay, that it has legs?
Yeah, it certainly feels like it in both ways. Yes, it's definitely real, and yes, it feels like it's here to stay. And in a sense, even though we were out of, like, we weren't in the White House for 4 years, we've sort of had, like, at least at our organization, like 4 years of this pent up energy. And so we've been sending people, in many cases, to their first job on the Hill, working as a staff assistant, or maybe driving a congressman around or whatever. And basically every time we throw a party or have an event, we have like 300 to 400 people show up, and people stay talking. We did one of these last week, and we had people there talking until 2 a.m. And it has been like constant for 4 years. The only thing that has changed is that number is going up. The number of people that are doing that sort of thing. And I have some interesting views on sort of like the social ecology on how events and creating a social network works. So you find a lot of these people, the way that they sort of get beat into conformity in DC is like spending time around people that are not aligned with their background or their worldview, and sort of to become a part of that group, they compromise on values, on issues, on things that they care about. Mm-hmm. The thing is, when you sort of control the group around ideology and competency, is these are all like high performance people who agree with each other. And it creates an insane sort of incentive to be involved with each other socially, but also keep each other in line.
Okay, so perfect. Is the Christian element, if you're to introduce, so you've got this group and you got this spirit, and you got people that are aligned, and therefore they're not burning out and becoming disenchanted with the world. If you introduce the Christian element to that group, does that currently enhance unity, or is it an essential part? I'm not talking in the abstract as much as I'm talking about your actual sense of what's bonding this new spirit.
Yeah, so it's very interesting to think about in our circles. So we've got, I would say that predominantly, probably like about 60% of the people in our network that like we vetted, we would recommend for a job, people we like, come to our events, that sort of thing, are Catholic. And then, most, say like 35% are Protestants in some variety, and then like 5% other. And the one thing that's really interesting is I think everybody, Catholics and Protestants alike, have become way more small c Catholic in the way that they interact with each other. So there are these things that happen where, like, Protestants will end up going, it's like, hey, I'm going to go to daily mass. You want to come? And the Protestants are like, yeah, I'll go do that. And then the inverse also happens. Like, hey, we're doing this thing at church on Sunday. You want to come? And it's like, yes, I have to go to mass first, but then I will come meet you at your service that starts at 10:15 or whatever. So there is like a very interesting Catholicity that's happening. And people really are sort of keeping each other in check when it comes to sin. Like it's, maybe you were in this, you were dating this girl and you said something and she said she didn't want to see you anymore. And what you said was probably wrong. Dudes in our network will call you on that. Like they hear about it and they'll say, dude, you really shouldn't have said that. Like that was bad. You should probably repent, tell her that you're sorry. So it's interesting, like thinking back to the way all of this stuff started. That was not, we've sort of developed this social ecology and way of thinking about it over time. That was not necessarily our intent early on. But now that it's happening, it's like, this is great. We should encourage this. We should do more events. We should X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
So,
it brings me it's interesting. I don't know, I think I've heard stories of Nixon, like in the White House, and they'd be bringing like, the evangelicals for Jesus through the White House or whatever.
Yeah.
And then, leave the door cracked. And then Reagan would just kind of strike the pose. And then they'd be like, oh, the president's praying, praying, move along, and everybody. So, the God and country thing, Christianity has always been used as just a way to kind of get votes. But what's interesting about this, and at least why I have some hope, is as the nation secularized and met Black Lives Matter riots and stupid COVID decisions and immigration to the dregs, Christianity no longer really became, and evangelicals in large part like didn't really turn out for Trump. You had Christianity as a calling card to get votes actually became less, which means hopefully some of this Christianity you're talking about is kind of genuine again. It's like, I actually don't need, in a large part in this society, this secularized society, I don't need it to get the votes. But hey, I think it's actually kind of good. Like, I'm hopeful that is what's going on and not just the Nixon thing.
Yeah, let me put it to you actually in a more succinct way. It is rare that at a meal that I'm having in DC that I have to be the one that says, hey, let's pray for our food real quick before we continue this conversation. And that is really encouraging.
Yeah. I mean, when the VP
like
was talking
the fact
about
that I don't have to be the one to bring, like someone else said, they start doing the bless us, O Lord, for these thy gifts, et cetera. It's that I don't have to be the one to bring it up. It's cool. It's cool.
Okay, but now we're Protestants, so let's do the Protestant thing. What do the Protestants need to, like, did the Protestants, the Catholic number is much larger.
Yeah.
Our nation is historically Protestant through and through. Just if you go back to the founding, it wasn't a Catholic thing, it was a Protestant thing.
Yeah.
Why are the Protestants not on their game?
Yeah. I think there are a couple of contributing factors. I think one is, this sort of big Eva phenomenon. There's sort of been we've kind of stepped away from sort of or been encouraged to step away from the political realm and from taking, vigorous political stances. I think a lot of the traditional evangelical institutions that have traditionally been like very conservative and taken hard stances on issues have sort of decayed to an extent to which they don't do that anymore. Like I could name the ERLC as an example of that. And then I would also say that there's been a much bigger focus on institutionalizing Catholic social teaching and political thought than there has been sort of a coherent and cohesive Protestant version. And then the last thing I would say would be a lack of aligned infrastructure in DC, i.e. there are very few conservative Protestant churches. So I think those are all like contributing factors that have led to sort of this perfect storm where it's a lot of Catholics, basically leading on a lot of these issues, which again, like I being small c Catholic about it, like I do think we're allies. I think they do a great job, but you bring up the historicity of, America being a Protestant nation, and it's like, yeah, absolutely. We should be there.
Yeah. Well, I've got more questions I can fire. Jake, what do you got?
Keep going. Right.
I'm interested in like let's do the big church, or not big church, the big government, little government thing,
Oh,
I think, conservatives are out there, boomers, others that are, to be conservatives to have smaller government. And then Trump talked about shutting down the DOE. Is that going to happen?
it's being worked on. He signed some executive orders. I expect there will be a lot of court challenges, but I think it's it's an ongoing vigorous debate that's being had on the question of career personnel. Is it better to just like delete these roles, or is it better to fill them with our people? I would say like my view in a personal capacity would be it probably makes sense to delete a fair number of roles, right? Like the DEI office, not really contributing to social flourishing or the economy, could probably just be deleted. But in terms of like setting a sort of nationwide curriculum, let me paint two different pictures. One, we delete the Department of Education and everyone sort of gets to go their own way, right? So
back to the states.
Yep. So down in Alabama, you get super conservative, pro-America, pro-God curriculum. You go to California and it's basically like you're getting the Saul Alinsky training program. Like that is what you're getting in California. Hypothetical, what if, at the national level, we could say it's all pro-God, pro-America, American history. Seems like a good thing, as just a hypothetical there, but maybe something worth considering. And so I think there are a lot of sort of applications for this aside from the Department of Education, but I think it's going to be both and. It's going to be, yes, there are a lot of things that the federal government doesn't need to be doing. It should be smaller than it is now. A lot of things that need to be deleted. But to the extent that we can cement conservative victory for centuries, we should do so.
Now, when it comes to this, so we did DOE. Let's talk about the administrative state for a moment. And then I want to use both of those as examples to then measure the DC vibes and the young people. Okay, so you mentioned, hey, hypothetically, what if we had like this kind of federal education deal? And I'm wondering, the question that's coming is, give me whatever we're calling this group, which is not the new right, whatever we're calling
conservatives,
the young conservatives,
no.
Zoomer conservatives, Okay,
period.
Yes, them. I want to know how much they're with you on that, and then how much of them would be. I think it was even in the up from conservatism, the argument was slay it at the federal level and give it to the states. But before we actually answer that question, let's go administrative state. Do you have the numbers on this? I remember I read it somewhere, but basically like what percentage you got elected officials and then you have the whole bureaucracy. Do we have any solid numbers on?
Yeah. So, I think the easiest way to put it is like, you just look at, what the president has authority over, right? So he gets to pick, depending on how you count, 4,000 to 4,500 people. And then there are about 3 million career civil service protected
that
employees.
are not elected, that are part of these various organizations and entities. Now, Theo Wold, I believe, wrote the chapter on the administrative state in that book. And he just was very practical with it. You could sunset these things. You could, policies can be implemented to actually cut this puppy back. What percentage of the administrative state do you want to cut back? You want to kill the whole thing? Can we kill all 100%? Can we
What,
kill half of it?
Have no federal government employees aside from the 4,000 the president gets to pick?
Yeah, there you go.
That seems bad.
Okay.
Seems like that would
Good.
work.
I thought you might say something like
Yeah.
that. So what percentage of it do you want to destroy?
I would literally have to pull a percentage out of the hat.
It's a rough ballpark.
Yeah, I would say like between 30 to 40% could probably go.
30 to 40% of it has to go.
Mhm.
And then, of course, the other 60 to 70%, you want to juice, you want to enhance, you want to Christianize, you want to conservativize, you want it to, it needs to be healed, but you want to keep about 60, 70%. You think it actually has a function and a place, but needs to be enhanced.
Yeah, I mean, I think it could be reduced over time beyond that. The problem is like, so, I mentioned that a lot of these people are civil service protected, which means, well, I guess we're having several ongoing lawsuits about what that actually means. But generally, it means that you can only fire them for cause. You can't fire them, because you don't like their politics or whatever. So what's going to happen over a period of time is we are going to have to slowly replace these people in roles, which means we're going to have to tell a bunch of our guys, hey, do you want to work, as a career at the Department of Labor for the next 40 years, And so really what we're going to have to focus on is going through sort of the traditional civil service process to be able to get people into those roles. And that's not something that we're focused on, as an organization. We're focused on, sort of these political roles, but
you're focused on the narrow ones that are actually elected by the president.
Yeah. And, chiefs of staff hiring people in the House and the Senate, and nonprofits, think tanks, that sort of thing.
Is anyone doing your work for those civil service roles?
Not yet. It's something I would like to get to eventually. These more political roles feel very pressing, and we are still small. We're talking about, in terms of these roles in the House, the Senate, nonprofits, and in the administration, we're talking about 10,000 jobs, 10,000 people. And I think that's going to have the highest and most immediate impact. But in a long-term view, you want to cement change for a century, it's going to be replacing a lot of those career civil service protected people.
So if I am take all of the 30-year-olds and down in DC that are actually engaged in politics, what's the percentage that they come up with of how much of the administrative state they want to destroy?
I think anywhere between 10% to 70% is an acceptable answer.
Okay, you're going to be okay within those at that party if you say anywhere between 10 and 70. Mm-hmm. Okay, but now average it out. Where do you think they really shake down? Does that mean they average out with you about
they 30, probably average out with me.
30 what did you say, 30 to 40?
Yeah, 30 to 40 I said.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
And if you were to run that same question 15 years ago for the 30-year-olds and down, same number?
I think it would have been a lot more.
Okay.
A lot higher, because there were so many more libertarians back then.
There you go.
We're converting them, baby.
Thus is the vibe shift. Thus
is the vibe shift.
I just think this, I'll just mention from my brothers, I'm a minister of the gospel. I'm a professor, and I'm at that 40 mark, millennial deal. The vibe shift makes perfect sense to me. So you can have limited government when you don't have Big Brutus in the bathroom with your second grade daughter. Yeah. And if you put Big Brutus in the bathroom with your second grade daughter, I guarantee you people are going to go to the authorities to make it stop.
Yeah.
And you could play that same when you didn't have the burning down of Minneapolis and every other one of these cities. So to the conservatives that are for limited government, if you lean limited government, I just point out, hey, I'm I'm in a range to go, I get what's going on here.
Yeah.
That's why I kind of find myself always like, well, let's talk about each particular.
Well, and there's this sort of there's a sort of coalition around it that there's a range of acceptable viewpoints. So let me give you a couple examples. Like Senator Rand Paul, okay, self-identifies as a libertarian, famously son of Ron Paul, right? However, there is a lot of alignment with the senator specifically on illegal immigration and foreign policy. And so it's about, finding issue areas where you can work together. He's not going to agree with us in many cases on trade. He's not going to agree with us in some cases on the legal immigration stuff. But there are a lot of issues we can work on everywhere else that we'd be in total alignment on. That's not the case with somebody like, say, Mitch McConnell, who's diametrically opposed to our worldview across the board on trade, on immigration, on foreign policy. Another example is there's sort of a wide range of what constitutes MAGA on a number of issues. I'll take our current, I would say we're sort of in a Cold War, or at the very least like a trade war with the Chinese at this point. It is currently an acceptable view in like MAGA to be, pro defending Taiwan in the event of an invasion, because they manufacture a large portion of the world's semiconductors, which power like basically all the technology in this room. And so there's an argument that it's in the national interest to do so. And then there are other people in the MAGA coalition who think we should not do that, and we should just, do our best to build a semiconductor industry here. And the thing that I appreciate about both of those arguments and people making those arguments on either side is they're both rooted in what is in our national interest. What is America first? It is fine within the conservative movement to have different policy prescriptions for that. But it's sort of this realignment of that is what we are focused on. This isn't like the war in Afghanistan. It's like actually a core issue that we're going to have to figure out for the future of our country.
Okay, last question for me. And this is more of at a cultural level, also thinking like what good leadership over movements. Where could this movement go wrong? Like in the next season here, the next 3 to 5 years, you can go 1 year to 4 or 5 years. It could be related to politics, but when you're looking at the spirit of the thing, the vibe of the thing, what's the Achilles heel? Where could this whole thing get scuttled?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing would be complacency. It feels like Pastor Wilson was saying to me earlier today, every day I wake up and it's like Christmas morning, like it's just every day. It's like new stuff. It's awesome. Everybody loves it. I don't want any of these people to think for a second that sort of the institutional forces in the establishment right would like to turn back the clock and go to a time before President Trump. There are still concerted efforts to do that even now while he's in the White House. That whatever happens in 2028 needs to be a return to, what we had in the early 2000s. There is a concerted effort with a lot of money and institutional power behind it. And the worst thing that we could do would be to not take it seriously and think that just because we're so back because of the vibe shift that we're just going to win forever. This is going to be something that we're going to have to continue to fight.
Very good.
Nick Solheim, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Very grateful. Thanks, Jared.